Inside the forbidden lockbox lies a farming secret so powerful that corporations have killed to keep it buried, a centuries-old agricultural method that could end world hunger while exposing how chemical giants have deliberately poisoned America's heartland for profit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Noah Mitchell never planned on becoming a farmer. With a degree in environmental science from Cornell and a promising career at a sustainability nonprofit in Chicago, he had built a life far removed from the rolling fields of central Nebraska where he'd grown up. Sunrise Acres had been in the Mitchell family since 1896, when Noah's great-great-grandfather Samuel claimed the land under the Homestead Act. Unlike the massive operations that had swallowed neighboring farms, their 320 acres had remained modestly sized and stubbornly traditional. Noah's father, Daniel, had resisted the pressure to expand into commercial monoculture farming, maintaining diverse crop rotations and avoiding the chemical regimens that had become standard practice. "The land remembers how you treat it," Daniel would often say, a philosophy that earned eye rolls from neighboring farmers with their GPS-guided irrigation systems and 1,000-acre operations. The Mitchell farm remained an anomaly, profitable enough to sustain a family, but never expanding beyond what Daniel felt he could properly steward. Noah had respected his father's principles, but never shared his passion for farming. Their relationship had been strained by Noah's decision to leave after high school. Their conversations over the years had been civil but infrequent, limited to holiday calls and occasional visits. When the call came that his father had suffered a fatal heart attack, while working in the fields, Noah had been coordinating a major climate resilience conference. He returned to Nebraska for the funeral, expecting to settle his father's affairs quickly. The modest farmhouse, with its faded wallpaper and well-worn furniture, felt like a museum of a past he had deliberately left behind. What Noah hadn't expected was his father's unusual will. Daniel had left the farm and all its assets to his only son, with a peculiar stipulation: Noah must personally operate the farm for at least one full growing season before making any decisions about its future. If he chose to sell before completing a harvest, 80% of the proceeds would go to the Clearwater County Agricultural Preservation Trust rather than to Noah. "Your father wanted you to make an informed decision," explained Margaret Garland, the elderly attorney who had handled the Mitchell family's legal matters for decades. "He believed you wouldn't truly understand what you'd be giving up without experiencing a full cycle on the land." Noah was initially angry at what felt like his father controlling him from beyond the grave. The timing couldn't have been worse. He was up for a promotion, had just moved in with his girlfriend Alyssa, and had no practical knowledge of running a farm. But the financial reality was clear. The farm was worth approximately $2.8 million, and Noah wasn't willing to forfeit over $2.2 million out of spite. So at 32, Noah found himself reluctantly moving back to the farmhouse, taking a one-year leave of absence from his non-profit position. Alyssa had been supportive, but unwilling to relocate to rural Nebraska, agreeing instead to weekend visits, an arrangement that put additional strain on their relationship. "It's just 1 year," Noah had assured her. "I'll hire help for the actual farming part and be back in Chicago by next year with a nice chunk of capital for our future." That had been the plan. What Noah hadn't anticipated was the difficulty of finding experienced farm help in a county where most skilled workers had either established their own operations or been hired by the massive Agricore corporation that now controlled nearly 60% of the farmland in the region. 3 weeks after moving back, Noah found himself alone in the farm office, a small room off the kitchen that had served as his father's headquarters. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, and a solid oak desk dominated the space, its surface covered with seed catalogues, equipment manuals, and handwritten ledgers. As Noah sorted through the materials, trying to make sense of the operation he was now responsible for, he discovered a sealed envelope taped to the underside of the desk's center drawer. His name was written on it in his father's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a brief letter. Noah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've inherited a responsibility you never wanted. I apologize for burdening you, but some things are bigger than our personal wishes. In the back of the north barn, behind the green toolbox, you'll find a metal lockbox that has been passed down through our family for generations. The key is enclosed with this letter. There's one absolute rule that has been followed since your great-great-grandfather's time. This box is only to be opened during the harvest season, specifically on the autumn equinox, after the first crops have been gathered. I know how this sounds, but I'm asking you to trust in our family's tradition. What you'll find inside will change your understanding of our land and possibly your path forward. The Mitchell legacy is in your hands now. I've always been prouder of you than I managed to express. Dad. Noah stared at the letter, emotions washing over him. His father had never been demonstrative with his feelings, and the final line struck him with unexpected force. Enclosed with the letter was an old-fashioned brass key with an unusual pattern of teeth. His first instinct was to dismiss the mysterious instructions as another example of his father's outdated superstitions. But curiosity led him to the north barn that same afternoon. The structure was the oldest building on the property, its massive hand-hewn beams dating back to the original homestead. Behind the large green toolbox, just as the letter had indicated, Noah found a section of wall that seemed slightly different from the surrounding boards. When he pressed on it, a small panel swung inward, revealing a recessed compartment containing a metal box, approximately 18 inches long and 12 inches wide. The lockbox was crafted from dark, age-blackened metal with intricate engravings, covering its surface, stylized plants, astronomical symbols, and what appeared to be some form of old-fashioned calendar notation. It had no manufacturer's mark or indication of its origin, but exuded an undeniable aura of age and significance. Using the key from his father's letter, Noah attempted to open the box, but found the lock immovable. He examined it more closely and realized that the mechanism appeared to be designed with some sort of seasonal timing element, something he had only read about in historical accounts of elaborate security systems. It seemed his father's instructions about the autumn equinox weren't merely traditional, but functional. The box was quite literally designed to open only at a specific time of year. Noah returned the box to its hiding place, both frustrated and intrigued. The autumn equinox was nearly 6 months away, meaning he would have to wait until his first harvest was underway to discover what his father had considered so important. As he walked back to the farmhouse, Noah's phone rang. His boss, Ellen, checking in on his timeline for return. "We need to know if you'll be back for the Peterson Foundation grant cycle," Ellen said, after brief condolences. "The deadline for the proposal is in August, and you're the only one with the right relationships there." "August will be right in the middle of harvest season," Noah replied, the farming terminology feeling strange in his mouth. "I'm legally obligated to complete the full growing cycle here." The disappointment in Ellen's voice was evident. "We may need to reassign your portfolio permanently if you can't commit. The climate resilience program can't just go into hibernation while you're farming, Noah." After ending the call, Noah stood in the kitchen and felt the weight of colliding worlds. In Chicago, critical climate work was moving forward without him. Here in Nebraska, fields needed planting decisions within weeks, and he barely understood the basics of the operation he'd inherited. And somewhere within all this was a mysterious lockbox that seemed to hold information his father had considered vital to understanding the farm's true significance, information he couldn't access until the harvest that now represented both his inheritance and the potential end of his career. As spring approached, Noah faced a decision that would shape not just the next year, but potentially his entire future. Commit fully to understanding the farm and its secrets, or go through the motions while planning his exit. What he couldn't possibly know was that the contents of that engraved metal box would soon connect these seemingly separate worlds in ways that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family, modern agriculture, and his own purpose. April arrived with relentless spring rains that delayed planting across much of Clearwater County. For Noah, this unexpected reprieve provided precious time to learn about the operation he had inherited. Each morning, he woke before dawn, a habit his body remembered from childhood despite years of city living, and spent hours poring over his father's meticulous farm records. The leather-bound ledgers told a story very different from what Noah had assumed about Sunrise Acres. Far from being a quaint, outdated operation holding stubbornly to tradition, his father had been running a sophisticated, regenerative agriculture system decades before the term became trendy in sustainability circles. The farm's modest size wasn't a limitation, but a deliberate choice to maintain the delicate balance Daniel had perfected. Fascinating, Noah muttered to himself one rainy afternoon, tracing his finger along charts showing soil carbon levels steadily increasing over 30 years. The exact opposite of what was happening on most conventional farms. According to his father's records, Sunrise Acres soil contained nearly 3 times the organic matter of neighboring properties, despite using virtually no synthetic fertilizers. This discovery forced Noah to re-evaluate his perception of his father. The man he had dismissed as resistant to change and science had actually been practicing cutting-edge agricultural methods that aligned perfectly with the climate resilience principles Noah advocated for in his professional life. When the rains finally subsided in late April, Noah faced his first major farming decision: what to plant and how. The previous fall, before his death, Daniel had prepared approximately half the acreage for spring planting, leaving the remainder in cover crops that now carpeted the fields in vibrant green. With no experienced help available, Noah called the one person who might offer guidance without judgment: Marcus Washington, the county extension agent who had worked closely with Daniel over the years. The middle-aged agronomist arrived the following morning in a mud-spattered pickup truck, his weathered face breaking into a smile as Noah greeted him on the porch. "Never thought I'd see a Mitchell back from the big city," Marcus said, shaking Noah's hand firmly. "Your father mentioned you were doing environmental work in Chicago." "Climate resilience and sustainable agriculture policy," Noah replied, feeling oddly defensive. "Though I'm finding that Dad was implementing many of those principles here all along," Marcus nodded, unsurprised. Daniel was ahead of his time. Most folks around here thought he was crazy for not maximizing yields with the Agricore program. They couldn't understand why he'd leave profit on the table. "The Agricore program?" Noah asked as they walked toward the fields. "Comprehensive management system," Marcus explained. "Seed to sale, they control every aspect of production. Proprietary seeds that only work with their chemical packages, satellite-guided precision application, guaranteed purchase contracts. About 60% of farmers in the county are enrolled now. What happens to the other 40%? Marcus's expression darkened. They're getting squeezed out, one by one. Independent operations can't compete with Agricore's scale. 3 family farms went under last year alone. As they surveyed the fields, Marcus confirmed what Noah had begun to suspect. His father's operation was deliberately designed to minimize external inputs while maximizing soil health. The diversity of crops, the integration of livestock through carefully managed grazing, the extensive use of cover crops, all created a nearly closed system that required minimal outside resources. Your father believed farming should produce more than it consumed, Marcus said, kneeling to examine the rich soil teeming with earthworms. Most modern agriculture uses 10 calories of fossil fuel energy to produce 1 calorie of food. Daniel was working toward the opposite ratio. With Marcus's guidance, Noah developed a planting plan that would maintain his father's rotational system while being manageable for a novice farmer working alone. They arranged for a local contractor to handle the heavy equipment work for planting, with Noah learning to operate the farm's older but well-maintained tractor for lighter tasks. As they finished their planning session, Marcus hesitated before returning to his truck. "There's something else you should know, Noah. Agricore has been trying to acquire your land for years. Your father turned down offers that were well above market value." "Why would a corporation that size care about our relatively small farm?" Noah asked. "Location, for one thing. Sunrise Acres sits at the headwaters of Prairie Creek, which feeds into the county's main water supply. But there's something else." Marcus lowered his voice slightly. "Your soil test results have always been anomalous. Higher organic matter, better structure, more microbial activity than any other property in the county. Agricore's research division has been particularly interested in those results." This information added another layer to the mystery of the lockbox. What if the family secret wasn't just an agricultural technique, but something more significant, something corporations like Agricore would pay handsomely to acquire? Before Noah could probe further, a sleek black SUV pulled into the farmyard, bearing the green and blue Agricore logo on its door. A man in his 40s emerged, dressed in business casual attire that looked out of place against the muddy farmyard. "Speaking of the devil," Marcus muttered, "that's Preston Ellis, Agricore's regional acquisition manager. Been hovering like a vulture since your father passed." Noah straightened his posture, suddenly conscious of his mud-spattered work boots and faded flannel shirt. "Thanks for the heads up, Marcus. I've got this." As Marcus departed with a skeptical glance at the Agricore representative, Noah approached the visitor with forced politeness. "Can I help you?" "Preston Ellis, Agricore Midwest Division," the man said, offering a business card and a too-firm handshake. "I've been trying to reach you since you arrived, Mr. Mitchell. I understand you've inherited quite a responsibility here." Noah nodded non-committally, immediately disliking the man's presumptuous tone. "I'll be direct," Ellis continued. "Agricore would like to present a purchase offer for Sunrise Acres. Given your situation, new to farming, career elsewhere, we believe we can structure a deal that would benefit everyone." He named a figure that made Noah blink, nearly 30% above the farm's already substantial market value. "That's certainly generous," Noah replied carefully, thinking of the mysterious lockbox and his father's insistence that he complete a full growing season. "But I'm not in a position to consider selling yet. My father's will requires that I operate the farm through harvest before making any decisions." Ellis's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, family obligations, we respect that. But farming is a risky business, Mr. Mitchell, especially for someone without experience. Equipment failures, weather events, market fluctuations, any number of things could turn a promising season into a financial disaster." The implied threat wasn't subtle. "Are you suggesting something might happen to my crops, Mr. Ellis?" "Not at all," Ellis replied smoothly, "simply pointing out the realities of modern agriculture. The offer I've outlined expires in 30 days. After that, market conditions may not support such generosity." He handed Noah a thick envelope. Our full proposal, including some interesting projections about farming in this region over the next decade. I think you'll find it enlightening." After Ellis departed, Noah opened the envelope and found not just a purchase offer, but a detailed analysis predicting the collapse of independent farming in Clearwater County within 5 years. According to Agricore's models, climate change, water access issues, and market consolidation would make operations like Sunrise Acres economically non-viable, regardless of their agricultural practices. The final page contained a personal note. "Your father was offered this same opportunity multiple times. His rejection cost him, and potentially you, millions in potential value. Don't make the same mistake." That evening, as storm clouds gathered on the western horizon, Noah sat on the farmhouse porch, the Agricore proposal in one hand and his father's farming journal in the other. The contrast between the corporation's clinical assessment of agricultural assets and his father's passionate descriptions of living soil and ecosystem health couldn't have been more stark. Noah's phone buzzed with a text from Alyssa. "Funding came through for the Indonesia Climate Adaptation Project. Team wants to know if you can join the site visit in June. Need to confirm by Friday." The Indonesia project had been Noah's focus before his father's death, a groundbreaking initiative to help coastal communities adapt to rising sea levels. Being excluded would effectively end his role in international climate work, but June would be a critical time for the crops he had just committed to planting. As rain began to fall, Noah found himself drawn not to his phone to respond, but to the north barn, where the mysterious lockbox lay hidden. Standing before the secret compartment, he removed the box and traced his fingers over its intricate engravings. The astronomical symbols seemed to tell a story. The sun's path through seasons, moon phases, what appeared to be constellations aligned with planting times. "What were you protecting, Dad?" Noah whispered. "What was worth turning down millions and alienating your only son for?" The lockbox, designed to open only at harvest, remained stubbornly silent. When Noah returned to the house, rain now falling in sheets, he found an email from Ellen formally requesting his decision about the Indonesia project. With a deep breath, he replied that he would have to decline. His obligations in Nebraska would prevent travel until at least October. Her response came quickly. "I'm sorry to hear that, Noah. We'll need to reassign your position effective immediately. Your replacement will contact you for transition details." Just like that, the career he had spent a decade building was slipping away. Noah closed his laptop and walked to the window, watching lightning illuminate the fields he had reluctantly inherited. The crops weren't even in the ground yet, and already he had sacrificed his professional standing for this land and whatever secret it held. The mystery of the lockbox had just cost him dearly. Whatever it contained would need to be worth not just the value of the farm, but the career he was watching dissolve before his eyes. As Noah contemplated this new reality, his phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. The voice that answered. His hello was elderly but sharp, a woman introducing herself as Eleanor Whitman, his nearest neighbor to the east. "I was your father's friend for 40 years, she explained, "and I know about the lockbox you found. Before harvest comes, there are things you need to understand about your family's legacy and why Agricore is so determined to acquire your land. Things I couldn't say over the phone." "How do you know about the lockbox?" Noah asked, startled. "Because my family has one too," Eleanor replied. "Or did, until Agricore forced us to sell 3 years ago. If you want to understand what you're really fighting for, come to my place tomorrow morning. The Mitchell and Whitman farms share more than just a property line, young man. We share a secret that could change everything if we can keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Noah agreed to the meeting, his mind racing with new questions. As he finally prepared for bed, thunder rolling across the prairie, he realized something had shifted within him. What had begun as a reluctant obligation, a year of farming to secure his inheritance, had somehow transformed into something far more intriguing. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the harvest lockbox, they were clearly valuable enough that people had sacrificed careers, relationships, and millions of dollars to protect them. Whether he had intended it or not, Noah Mitchell had become part of something much bigger than a family farm in Nebraska. Outside, the spring rain nourished fields that were still largely a mystery to him. By morning, he would need to decide whether to plant not just crops, but his future in this soil, committing fully to uncovering the truth his father had deemed worth protecting at all costs. The morning after the storm broke clear and cool, with puddles reflecting a cloudless sky, as Noah drove his father's old pickup down the gravel road leading to the Whitman place. Eleanor Whitman's property stood in stark contrast to the thriving Mitchell farm, its fields now uniformly planted with Agricore's proprietary corn varieties, the former pastures converted to row crops that stretched to the horizon in perfectly straight lines. The farmhouse itself remained, though it appeared diminished somehow, surrounded by corporate agriculture rather than the diverse family farm it had once anchored. Eleanor Whitman waited on the porch, a slight woman in her late 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that retained a fierce intelligence despite her age. "You look like your grandfather," she said by way of greeting, studying Noah's face intently. "Same eyes, same way of standing. Daniel favored your grandmother's side." Noah was taken aback. "You knew my grandfather. I barely remember him. He died when I was 5. Thomas Mitchell was my father's closest. A friend," Eleanor explained, leading Noah into a kitchen that smelled of coffee and fresh-baked bread. "Our families have been neighbors since 1896. The Whitmans and the Mitchells were part of the original Homestead Act group that settled this county." She poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs before continuing. "But our connection goes back even further to before we came to America. Your great-great-grandfather, Samuel Mitchell, and my great-great-grandfather, Joseph Whitman, didn't just happen to claim adjacent parcels by coincidence." "What do you mean?" Noah asked, settling at the worn kitchen table. Eleanor disappeared briefly into another room, returning with a leather-bound book that appeared even older than his father's farm journals. "This is my family's record, passed down through generations. It begins in 1866, when our families were still in Sweden." Noah leaned forward, his interest genuinely piqued. He had known vaguely that his ancestors had emigrated from Scandinavia, but his father had rarely discussed family history beyond his grandfather's time. "The Mitchells weren't always Mitchells," Eleanor explained, opening the book to reveal handwritten Swedish text with occasional English translations inserted on notepaper. "Your family was originally named Michelson. They changed it when they immigrated, just as my family changed Whitman to Whitman. That's fairly common with immigration," Noah remarked, unsure why this history lesson related to the lockbox. "What's not common," Eleanor continued, "is why our families came to America, and specifically to this county." She turned to a carefully preserved map bound into the journal, showing the original survey of Clearwater County with certain areas marked in faded red ink. "Our ancestors were part of a group that called themselves the Vectare of Jordan, guardians of the earth. They were farming families who held ancient knowledge about soil regeneration and plant breeding that had been passed down since before the Middle Ages. Techniques that allowed them to grow abundant food even in poor conditions, without depleting the land." Noah's scientific skepticism stirred. Agricultural techniques from the Middle Ages wouldn't be particularly advanced by modern standards. Eleanor's eyes flashed. "That's what Agricore thought too, until they soil-tested our land." The Guardians weren't practicing medieval farming, Noah. They were preserving knowledge much older and more sophisticated, methods that modern science is only beginning to rediscover, involving specific microbial communities, companion planting sequences, and what you might call probiotic additions to soil. She turned to another page, showing a diagram that looked remarkably similar to the engravings on Noah's lockbox. In the late 1800s, these techniques became coveted by powerful interests in Europe. Companies were beginning to develop chemical, fertilizers and pesticides, the beginnings of industrial agriculture. Our ancestors' methods threatened their business model because farms using the Guardian techniques didn't need their products. So the families emigrated to escape corporate persecution, Noah asked, connecting dots that seemed simultaneously far-fetched and eerily plausible. They came to America to preserve the knowledge, Eleanor corrected. They deliberately selected lands in this county because of the specific soil composition and watershed characteristics. The original Guardian group included 5 families who strategically purchased properties, forming a circle around what we now call the Prairie Creek headwaters. Noah recalled Marcus mentioning that Sunrise Acres sat at the headwaters of the creek that fed the county's water supply. And each family had a lockbox. Eleanor nodded. Each contained 1/5 of the complete knowledge. No single family held all the secrets. It was too dangerous. The lockboxes were designed to open only at harvest, when the techniques were being actively demonstrated in the fields. This prevented the information from being stolen or used by those who didn't understand the entire system and its ethical framework. Ethical framework? Noah repeated. The Guardian methods aren't just techniques. They're a philosophy about humanity's relationship with the land, Eleanor explained. The knowledge comes with responsibility. It's not meant to be patented, monetized, or controlled. It's meant to be shared with those who will use it ethically to feed people while regenerating the earth. Noah ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this fantastical story. This sounds like something from a movie, Eleanor. Secret agricultural societies, ancient knowledge, corporate conspiracies. I understand your skepticism, Eleanor said calmly. I felt the same way when my father first told me, but consider this. Your family's farm has consistently produced yields comparable to conventional operations while using virtually no synthetic inputs. Your soil organic matter increases every year instead of depleting. Your water retention capacity is 3 times the county average. And your crops have shown remarkable resilience to climate volatility that has devastated neighboring farms. These were all facts Noah had verified in his father's records. But that could be explained by good regenerative agriculture practices, he argued. No ancient secrets required. Where do you think modern regenerative agriculture rediscovered its principles? Eleanor countered. The Guardians have been quietly influencing agricultural science for generations, sharing pieces of knowledge strategically. Your own work in climate resilience has probably been influenced by Guardian concepts without you realizing it. She closed the family journal and fixed Noah with an intent gaze. 3 years ago, Agricore's research division somehow discovered the existence of the Guardian knowledge. They began systematically targeting the descendant families of the original 5 farms. Only yours remains independent. The others have been acquired or forced into bankruptcy. And the lockboxes? Noah asked, thinking of his own hidden in the north barn. Agricore has obtained 3, Eleanor admitted, sadness crossing her features. Mine was emptied before I sold. I moved the contents to another location they haven't discovered. Your father helped me. He knew they would come for Sunrise Acres next, which is why he became so insistent about preserving the farm's independence. Noah's mind flashed to his father's declining health in recent years, the stress lines that had deepened around his eyes, his increasing reclusiveness. The pressure from Agricore contributed to his heart attack, didn't it? Eleanor nodded solemnly. Daniel fought them with everything he had. When direct offers didn't work, they tried other tactics, manipulating market access, pressuring equipment, dealers not to service his machinery, even attempting to influence bank loan officers to call in operating lines of credit. That's illegal, Noah protested, and nearly impossible to prove when you're one farmer against a multinational corporation with an army of lawyers, Eleanor replied. This isn't just about business for them, Noah. The guardian knowledge threatens the very foundation of industrial agriculture. The idea that farmers need external inputs, proprietary seeds, and synthetic chemicals to be productive. Noah thought about the intricate engravings on his lockbox, astronomical symbols, planting diagrams, soil microbiology rendered in ancient artistic style. So what's actually in the lockbox? Seed varieties, formulas for soil amendments. Much more, Eleanor said. Your family's box contains the cornerstone of the entire system, the microbial formulations that establish the soil-food web. Without it, the other components are far less effective. That's why Agricore wants your land so desperately. They suspect what your box contains, even if they don't know exactly. Noah sat back, overwhelmed by implications. If Eleanor was right, his father hadn't been merely a stubborn traditionalist clinging to outdated farming methods. He had been the final guardian of knowledge that could potentially transform global agriculture, reducing or eliminating dependence on the very products that made companies like Agricore billions in profits annually. Why didn't my father ever tell me any of this? Noah asked, a familiar hurt resurfacing. Why keep me in the dark if it was so important? Eleanor's expression softened. Daniel always planned to share everything when you were ready. But then you chose a different path, showing more interest in policy and theory than in working the land directly. The guardian knowledge can't be fully understood through books or data. It must be experienced through seasons of practice. She reached across the table, placing a weathered hand over Noah's. He was immensely proud of your environmental work, Noah. He told me often, but he also believed some knowledge can only be transferred through direct experience with the soil, plants, and seasons. That's why his will requires you to complete a full growing cycle. He wanted you to be receptive to what the lockbox contains when the time came to open it. Noah thought about his father's letter. What you'll find inside will change your understanding of our land and possibly your path forward. The words carried new weight now. I'm still not sure I believe all this, he admitted, but something is clearly special about our farm, and Agricore's interest is undeniable. You don't need to believe everything today, Eleanor said gently. Just plant your crops, tend your fields, and observe with an open mind. The land itself will show you much of what you need to understand before the box opens at harvest. Before Noah left, Eleanor gave him a small leather pouch. Seed saved from last year's crops on your father's farm. Not the commercial varieties, but the guardian heritage lines he maintained in the South Field. They may seem insignificant, but they're part of an unbroken genetic lineage going back centuries, cultivated to work specifically with your soil's microbial community. Noah accepted the pouch, weighing it in his palm, ordinary-looking seeds that supposedly contained extraordinary potential. What happens if Agricore gets all 5 lockboxes and the complete knowledge? Eleanor's expression darkened. They would patent and commodify pieces of the system while burying anything that threatens their business model. The holistic approach would be fragmented, its ecological safeguards ignored, and the world would lose perhaps its best hope for truly sustainable agriculture in the face of climate change. As Noah drove back to Sunrise Acres, the spring sun warming fields nearly ready for planting, he felt the weight of a legacy far heavier than he had imagined. He had inherited not just a farm, but a final line of defense protecting knowledge that powerful interests were determined to control. Whether Eleanor's fantastic story was entirely true remained to be seen. But the pressure from Agricore, his father's secretive behavior, and the elaborate lockbox, with its seasonal timing mechanism, all suggested something extraordinary was indeed at stake. Noah parked beside the farmhouse and walked to the edge of the closest field. He knelt and took a handful of soil, letting it crumble through his fingers as he had seen his father do countless times. Was there really something miraculous in this dirt? Some ancient microbial community cultivated through centuries of guardian stewardship, or was this all an elaborate mythology built around good farming practices? The scientist in him demanded evidence, but another part, perhaps the part that connected him to generations of Mitchells before him, felt a stirring of something like recognition. This land had sustained his family for over a century against economic pressures that had driven most small farms out of business. If there was even a chance that Eleanor's story contained truth, he owed it to his father's memory to discover it. With new determination, Noah reached for his phone and called Marcus Washington at the extension office. "I need to modify our planting plan," he said when the agronomist answered. "There's a section in the south field where I want to plant some heritage seed varieties, and I'll need your help designing a controlled comparison with conventional methods." The scientific method, Noah decided, would be his path to the truth. He would run Sunrise Acres as a living experiment until harvest brought the opportunity to open the lockbox and discover exactly what secret had been worth his father's life to protect. By early June, Sunrise Acres had transformed from bare fields to a vibrant tapestry of green. The main crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat, grew in careful rotation across the majority of the acreage, following the planting plan Noah had developed with Marcus. But it was the experimental plot in the south field that increasingly commanded Noah's attention. There, he had planted the heritage seeds Eleanor had given him alongside modern varieties, creating side-by-side comparison strips that allowed him to observe differences in germination, growth patterns, and resilience. Already, the distinctions were becoming apparent, even to his relatively untrained eye. The heritage plants seemed to establish more quickly, their root systems developing with remarkable vigor. When a 3-day heat spike hit in late May, the modern varieties had showed visible stress, while the guardian lineage crops had continued steady growth, their leaves remaining firm and vibrant. "It's the root architecture," Marcus explained, during one of his regular visits, carefully digging beside plants of each type to expose their underground structures. "Look at the difference in fine root hairs and depth. The heritage varieties are accessing moisture much deeper in the soil profile." Noah documented everything meticulously, establishing the kind of rigorous comparative study he would have designed in his previous academic work. Each day brought new observations that both fascinated and puzzled him, results that defied conventional agricultural expectations but aligned with Eleanor's extraordinary claims. June also brought an unexpected visitor. Alyssa, Noah's girlfriend, from Chicago, arrived for a weekend visit that had been planned months earlier. Their relationship had grown increasingly strained since Noah's departure, limited to brief phone calls and text messages that felt increasingly disconnected from each other's daily realities. "This is rustic," Alyssa commented, as she wheeled her suitcase into the farmhouse, her designer shoes already dusty from the short walk from her car. A successful marketing executive, she looked distinctly out of place in the modest kitchen, with its 1980s appliances and practical furnishings. "It's functional," Noah replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the home that had begun to feel comfortable to him over the past months. Dad wasn't big on renovations. Their weekend together highlighted the growing distance between them. Alyssa had brought work with her, spending hours on her laptop addressing client emergencies, while Noah found himself repeatedly drawn to the fields, checking irrigation, monitoring his experimental plots, and noting developments in his increasingly detailed farm journal. On Saturday evening, Noah took Alyssa to dinner at the only restaurant in Clearwater's small downtown, a family-owned steakhouse that served locally raised beef. He had hoped for a chance to reconnect, but the conversation repeatedly stalled, neither of them quite able to bridge the gap between their diverging worlds. "I've been offered a promotion," Alyssa said finally, setting down her wineglass. "Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. It would mean more travel, mainly to the West Coast, and a significant salary increase." "That's fantastic," Noah replied genuinely. "You've been working toward this for years." Alyssa studied him for a moment before continuing. "It also means I need to decide about the condo. The lease renews in August, and with you here indefinitely." She left the sentence unfinished, its implication hanging between them. "I'm committed until at least October," Noah reminded her. "The harvest, the lockbox, figuring out what Dad was protecting." "The lockbox," Alyssa interrupted, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Noah, I've been patient with this sabbatical. I understand you needed to process your father's death and deal with the inheritance. But these stories about guardian societies and ancient agricultural secrets? You're a scientist. You have had a meaningful career addressing real climate issues." Noah felt a flare of defensiveness. "What I'm discovering here is directly connected to climate resilience. The preliminary data from my experimental plots shows drought tolerance and carbon sequestration rates that exceed anything in the published literature. This could revolutionize sustainable agriculture. And you're getting this from a handful of plants in a field behind your dad's barn," Alyssa said, not unkindly, but with clear disbelief. "Not from peer-reviewed research or controlled studies. Sometimes the field is the laboratory," Noah countered, surprised by his own vehemence. "Indigenous and traditional knowledge systems have preserved vital ecological practices for centuries outside academic institutions. That doesn't make them less valid." Alyssa reached across the table, taking his hand. "I hear you defending ideas you would have questioned critically 6 months ago. I'm worried about you, Noah. Isolated out here, surrounded by family mythology, under financial pressure to make this farm work." Her concern was genuine, which somehow made it more difficult to bear. Noah recognized the rational basis for her skepticism, the same doubts he himself had harbored initially. But his daily observations in the fields were becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Their drive back to the farm passed mostly in silence. When they arrived, Noah noticed a vehicle parked near the mailbox at the end of the long driveway. A black SUV with the Agricore logo visible even in the dim evening light. "Wait here," he told Alyssa, tension immediately replacing his earlier melancholy. As Noah approached, Preston Ellis emerged from the SUV, his corporate casual attire as inappropriate for the rural setting as always. "Mr. Mitchell," he called with manufactured joviality, "hope I'm not interrupting your evening. I was driving by and noticed lights at the house." "Agricore executives don't drive by family farms at 9:30 p.m. on a Saturday," Noah replied coldly. "What do you want, Ellis?" The corporate representative's facade of friendliness faded slightly. "Our offer expires in 3 days. I wanted to ensure you had given it proper consideration, especially in light of—" He glanced toward the house where Alyssa stood watching from the porch. "Your other commitments and opportunities." The implied surveillance sent a chill through Noah. "You've been monitoring my personal life?" Ellis shrugged unapologetically. "Due diligence on significant acquisitions is standard practice. Your girlfriend's promotion, your former employer's restructuring, the challenges you've faced finding seasonal labor, all relevant factors in your decision-making process." Noah took a step forward, anger rising. "Get off my property. Any communication regarding your offer should go through my attorney." "Of course," Ellis replied smoothly, unintimidated. "Just remember that farming operations require significant infrastructure. Equipment breaks down, irrigation systems fail, storage facilities." develop structural issues, particularly when maintenance has been deferred. Before Noah could respond to the thinly veiled threat, Ellis handed him a business card. "My direct line. When you're ready to discuss terms, day or night, I'm available." He returned to his vehicle and drove away, leaving Noah shaking with a combination of anger and unease. When Noah rejoined Alyssa on the porch, she was wide-eyed. "What was that about?" "Agricore wants to buy the farm," Noah explained, keeping his tone even. "They're being increasingly aggressive about it." "Why? It can't be just about the acreage. There's plenty of farmland in Nebraska." Noah hesitated, unsure how much to share. Alyssa already thought he was being influenced by family mythology and isolation, explaining the guardian knowledge would only reinforce her concerns. Yet he needed someone to understand what he was facing. "It's about the soil microbiology," he said finally, choosing the most scientifically credible explanation. "Dad developed a unique regenerative system here. The soil health metrics are off the charts compared to conventional agriculture. Agricore wants to study it, patent whatever they can, and control the technology." This wasn't a lie, merely a simplified version of the truth that omitted the more fantastic elements of Eleanor's story. Alyssa considered this explanation, her marketing mind engaging. "That actually makes sense. Agricultural intellectual property is huge business. Monsanto built a global empire through patent control of seed genetics." They moved inside, the encounter with Ellis casting a shadow over the remainder of their evening. The next morning, as Alyssa prepared to return to Chicago, the conversation they'd been avoiding finally materialized. "I can't wait indefinitely, Noah," she said, as she packed her overnight bag. "I need to know if you're coming back in October, or if this farm has become your new life." Noah leaned against the bedroom doorframe, genuinely uncertain of the answer. 2 months ago, he would have unequivocally confirmed his return to Chicago and their life together. Now each day spent watching the crops grow, documenting the remarkable performance of the heritage varieties, and piecing together his family's legacy made that future less clear. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "I need to see this through. The growing season, the harvest, whatever's in the lockbox. After that I can make an informed decision." Alyssa nodded, disappointment evident but not unexpected. "I'll need to renew the lease on my own then, and make some decisions about us." She zipped her bag closed with finality. "I love you, Noah, but I don't recognize the path you're on anymore." After Alyssa's departure, Noah threw himself into farm work with renewed intensity, as if physical exertion could provide clarity to his increasingly complicated situation. The conversation with Ellis had left him uneasy, particularly the veiled threats about equipment failures and infrastructure issues. That afternoon, Noah decided to conduct a thorough inspection of the farm's irrigation system, which drew water from Prairie Creek to supplement rainfall during the dry summer months. The main pump was housed in a small shed near where the creek entered his property, connected to a network of pipes that could deliver water to all the fields when needed. As Noah approached the pump house, he immediately noticed something wrong, water pooling around the foundation of the small structure. Inside, he found disaster. The main intake pipe had been severed, water spraying everywhere, and the expensive electric pump was completely submerged. Noah quickly shut off the water supply and power, but the damage was already done. The pump motor had likely been destroyed by water infiltration, and the control panel showed signs of electrical shorting. This wasn't accidental damage or normal equipment failure. The heavy-duty PVC pipe had been cleanly cut with what appeared to be a power tool. "Ellis," Noah muttered, anger building as he surveyed the sabotage. This wasn't just corporate pressure. It was criminal destruction of property, clearly intended to create a crisis that would force Noah to consider Agricore's offer more favorably. With the irrigation system disabled at the beginning of the hottest, driest part of summer, his crops faced a potentially devastating threat. Replacing the pump and repairing the system would cost thousands of dollars he didn't have, and without water, his carefully nurtured fields could wither within days. Noah immediately called Marcus Washington, who arrived within the hour to assess the damage. The extension agent's normally calm demeanor gave way to visible anger as he examined the cleanly cut pipe and ruined pump. "This wasn't an accident," Marcus confirmed, taking photos with his phone. "You should file a police report, though proving who did it will be nearly impossible." "It was Agricore," Noah said with certainty. "Ellis practically told me to expect infrastructure failures last night." Marcus nodded grimly. "Wouldn't be the first time. 3 farmers reported similar accidents before selling to them last year. No proof was ever found, of course. What are my options?" Noah asked, mentally calculating his meager savings against the repair costs. "I know a retired irrigation specialist who might have a salvageable pump in his barn," Marcus offered. "Won't be new or pretty, but it might get you through the season. For the pipework, I can round up some folks who'd be willing to help. Small farmers stick together around here, those of us who are left anyway." As they discussed repair possibilities, Noah's phone rang. Another unfamiliar local number. The man who identified himself was Craig Jensen, the loan officer at Clearwater County Bank, who had handled his father's accounts for years. "I'm calling about the operating line of credit for Sunrise Acres," Jensen began without preamble. "There's been a request for early review of the collateral position, which would include an immediate physical inspection of all farm assets and equipment." "A request from whom?" Noah asked, though he already suspected the answer. The banker hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to discuss specific board deliberations, but the bank recently approved a significant loan package to Agricore for their regional expansion. Some of our directors have expressed concerns about continuing exposure to independent operations in the same sector." The implications were clear. Agricore, now a major bank client, was using financial pressure tactics alongside physical sabotage. If the bank called in his father's operating loan or refused seasonal financing, Noah would have no way to repair the irrigation system or cover other essential expenses until harvest revenue materialized. "When is this inspection scheduled?" Noah asked, fighting to keep his voice level. "Tomorrow morning," Jensen replied. "I wanted to give you a courtesy heads up. Off the record, Mr. Mitchell, you might want to consider your options carefully. The agricultural landscape in this county is changing rapidly." After ending the call, Noah explained the new development to Marcus, who shook his head in disgust. "They're coming at you from all sides. Classic corporate takeover playbook. Create a crisis, then offer the only apparent solution." Noah stared at the damaged irrigation system, the reality of his situation hitting home. Agricore wasn't just making aggressive business offers. They were systematically undermining his ability to maintain the farm until harvest. And with each attack, the lockbox and its mysterious contents seemed increasingly worth protecting, regardless of the personal cost. "I'm not selling," Noah stated firmly. "Whatever's in that lockbox, whatever my father was protecting, it matters. I can feel it every time I walk the fields, every time I compare the heritage crops to the modern varieties. There's something here worth fighting for." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Then let's fix this pump and show these corporate vultures what Nebraska farmers are made of. I'll make some calls and have a crew here tomorrow. Meanwhile, you might want to check on those experimental plots in the south field. If they're as drought-resistant as you've been saying, we're about to find out." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across fields now threatened by both corporate greed and impending water stress, Noah felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from crisis. The inciting incident, this deliberate sabotage, had transformed his reluctant obligation into a purposeful mission. Whatever secrets the harvest lockbox contained, Agricore's increasingly desperate tactics suggested their value extended far beyond one family farm in Nebraska. And Noah Mitchell, who had arrived as an unwilling heir just a few months earlier, now found himself the last line of defense for knowledge that powerful interests would stop at nothing to control. The next morning dawned hot and cloudless, the kind of relentless summer heat that farmers across the Midwest had come to fear in recent years. By 7 a.m., the temperature had already climbed into the mid-80s, with forecasts predicting several days of similar conditions, precisely when crops needed consistent water the most. Noah had slept little, his mind cycling through strategies for the dual threats facing Sunrise Acres. The bank inspection scheduled for 9 a.m. could potentially trigger a financial crisis if the loan officer reported unfavorably on the farm's condition. Meanwhile, without a functioning irrigation system, his crops faced increasing stress with each rainless hour. As promised, Marcus Washington arrived shortly after sunrise with 3 pickup trucks following, fellow farmers and retired agricultural workers who had responded to his call for help. Among them was Sam Peterson, a weathered man in his 70s, who had serviced irrigation systems across the county for 4 decades before retirement. "Heard you got a pump problem," Sam said by way of greeting, squinting at Noah through thick glasses. "Marcus says it might have had some help failing." Noah led the group to the damaged pump house, where Sam conducted a thorough examination of the ruined equipment. "Deliberate, all right," he confirmed. "Seen this kind of accident more times than I can count, especially when big corporate interests want land that ain't for sale." From the back of his truck, Sam unloaded a refurbished pump, older than Noah's ruined one, but meticulously maintained. "Been saving this beauty for emergencies. She's not pretty, but she'll move water better than anything they sell nowadays. Built when things were made to last, not to be replaced." As Sam and 2 others began the technical work of installing the replacement pump and repairing the severed pipes, Noah expressed concern about paying for their time and materials. "Put your wallet away, son," said Frank Mendoza, a neighboring farmer who had maintained his independence despite increasing pressure. "This isn't about money. It's about standing together against those who turn us all into sharecroppers on our own land. Your father would have done the same for any of us." The mention of his father and the respect these hard-working people clearly held for him struck Noah deeply. Daniel Mitchell hadn't been the isolated traditionalist Noah had imagined. From Chicago, he'd been part of a tight-knit community of independent farmers fighting to preserve their way of life against corporate consolidation. As the repair work progressed, Noah received a text from Eleanor Whitman. "Bank inspection today. Be prepared for misdirection. Don't let them near the south field." The warning confirmed Noah's suspicion that the bank's sudden interest wasn't routine. If Agricore was pulling strings, the inspection might be as much about intelligence gathering as financial assessment. Noah returned to the farmhouse to prepare for the bank representative's arrival, gathering financial records and recent receipts. At precisely 9 a.m., a dark sedan pulled into the driveway. The man who emerged wasn't Craig Jensen, the loan officer Noah had spoken with, but someone younger and unfamiliar, dressed in a suit that seemed excessive for a rural farm visit in summer heat. "Thomas Kruger, Special Assets Division," the man introduced himself with a firm handshake. "I'll be conducting today's collateral verification and operational assessment." "Special assets?" Noah questioned. "That's for troubled loans. Sunrise Acres has never missed a payment." Kruger's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's merely procedural when significant collateral is involved. I'll need to inspect all major equipment, storage facilities, and crop development. Standard protocol." Something about Kruger felt off to Noah. His knowledge of agriculture seemed theoretical rather than practical. and his questions focused oddly on soil management practices and the specific varieties Noah was growing. When he asked about experimental plots, alarm bells rang in Noah's mind. Our experimental area is just standard crop rotation tests, Noah explained vaguely. Nothing special, just following county extension recommendations. Kruger made notes on his tablet as they toured the main barn, equipment shed, and grain storage facilities. His assessment of the irrigation system damage was cursory at best, showing little concern for how it might impact loan collateral value. "I'll need soil samples," Kruger announced as they completed the structural inspection. "Random testing is part of our updated environmental risk assessment protocol." Noah's suspicion crystallized into certainty. This wasn't a legitimate bank inspection, but a thinly veiled attempt to access the unique soil biology that made Sunrise Acres valuable to Agricore. "Any soil testing needs to be arranged through the proper legal channels," Noah responded firmly. "My attorney would need to approve the specific testing protocols and receive duplicate samples." Frustration flickered across Kruger's features before his professional mask returned. "As you wish, Mr. Mitchell. I'll note your reluctance to cooperate in my report." "I'm happy to cooperate with legitimate banking procedures," Noah countered. "But disguising corporate espionage as financial due diligence crosses several legal lines. I wonder if your banking regulators would agree." The mention of regulatory scrutiny visibly unsettled Kruger. He completed his inspection quickly afterward, making a point of photographing the irrigation repair work in progress. "The unauthorized modifications to water infrastructure may affect your compliance with loan covenants," he noted with thinly veiled satisfaction. "The unauthorized destruction of that infrastructure was reported to the sheriff this morning," Noah replied evenly, "complete with tire impressions from vehicles that were on my property without permission. I'm sure the investigation will be thorough." After Kruger departed, Noah returned to the pump house, where the repair team had made significant progress. The replacement pump was installed and operational testing was underway, with water once again flowing through the repaired pipes. "Should hold through harvest," Sam confirmed, wiping grease from his hands. "Might want to set up some security. Cameras out here, though. If they tried once, they'll try again." Noah nodded, making a mental note to order surveillance equipment. "Thank you all. I can't express how much this means." Frank Mendoza clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't thank us yet. We've got another problem brewing." He pointed toward the horizon where dark clouds were building unexpectedly, despite the earlier forecast for clear skies. "Those aren't natural rain clouds." "What do you mean?" Noah asked, confused. "Weather modification," Sam explained grimly. "Agricore's been cloud seeding to control rainfall patterns. They claim it's to optimize conditions for their contracted farms, but it conveniently creates drought conditions for holdouts like you." Noah's scientific skepticism surfaced. "Cloud seeding technology isn't that precise or reliable. It can't target specific properties. That's what we all thought," Frank replied. "Until independent testing showed rainfall decreasing by 40% on non-Agricore farms, while their properties got optimal precipitation. Too consistent to be coincidence." Before Noah could process this new information, his phone rang. Eleanor Whitman, calling with urgency in her voice. "Noah, are you near your experimental plots?" "No, I'm at the pump house." "Why?" "Drive there now," she instructed. "I just got word from a former Agricore employee who still has contacts inside. They've dispatched a team to collect samples from your heritage crop sections. The bank inspection was a distraction." Noah's stomach dropped. "On my way," he promised. Already running to his truck, he called to the others. "I need to check something in the south field. If anyone shows up asking questions, don't tell them where I went." The drive to the far side of the property took precious minutes. Dirt roads, made dusty by weeks without rain, As Noah crested the small rise overlooking the experimental plots, he spotted them, two figures in what appeared to be standard agricultural work clothes, but moving with purpose rather than the casual pace of farm laborers. One carried what looked like scientific sampling equipment, kneeling beside the heritage crop rows. Noah accelerated toward them, dust billowing behind his truck. The intruders spotted his approach and quickly gathered their materials, running toward a vehicle partially hidden in the tree line at the field's edge. Anger propelled Noah as he slammed his truck to a halt and jumped out. "Stop right there!" he shouted, sprinting toward the closest figure, a woman in her 30s with scientific equipment in her hands. The woman's companion, a younger man carrying sample containers, reached their vehicle first, starting the engine as Noah closed in on his colleague. "This is private property," Noah said, breathing hard as he confronted the woman. "You're trespassing and stealing proprietary agricultural material." "We're conducting authorized environmental sampling," she replied smoothly, though her eyes darted nervously to the idling vehicle. "Regional water quality assessment, without permission or notice," Noah challenged, "while taking samples specifically from experimental crop varieties. Try again." The woman's professional demeanor faltered. "Look, we're just following orders. The samples go to the lab. We don't ask questions." "Agricore," Noah stated flatly. "They sent you to steal genetic material and soil samples from my heritage crops." Rather than responding, the woman made a break for the waiting vehicle, dropping several collection vials in her haste. Noah didn't pursue. He had what he needed. The fallen vials were labeled with Agricore's research division codes, providing tangible evidence of corporate espionage. Carefully collecting the dropped samples and photographing them with his phone, Noah called Sheriff Donovan, the county's long-serving law enforcement officer. After explaining the situation, Noah was disappointed but not surprised by the response. "I can send a deputy out to take a report," the sheriff offered, a note of resignation in his voice. "But I should warn you, Agricore's legal team will claim these were independent contractors who misunderstood their assignment. They'll disavow any knowledge of trespassing instructions." "They're getting more desperate," Noah observed, looking out over his experimental plots to assess any damage. "First sabotage, then financial pressure, now direct theft attempts. They must think harvest is going to reveal something they can't afford to let become public, or something they want exclusively for themselves," the sheriff suggested. "Daniel dealt with similar issues in recent years, though never this aggressive. Whatever you're growing out there has them spooked or salivating, maybe both." After the sheriff's deputy had come and gone, recording the incident, but making it clear that prosecution was unlikely, Noah returned to the farmhouse to find Marcus waiting on the porch with a grave expression. "You've got bigger problems than trespassers," the extension agent said without preamble. "The National Weather Service just issued a severe weather warning. That system building to the northwest has intensified, possible supercell development, with damaging hail potential." Noah followed Marcus's gaze to the horizon, where the clouds had darkened ominously, forming the distinctive anvil shape that often preceded severe storms in the plains. "How bad?" "Radar shows hail signatures already, forming, golf ball size or larger possible, right path to hit your place directly." Marcus hesitated. "And it's moving unnaturally fast." "The cloud seeding?" Noah asked, recalling Frank's earlier warning. "Can't prove it, but the pattern is suspicious. Most storms this time of year track northeast. This one's coming straight east, right toward you, while somehow avoiding Agricore's largest contract operations to the north," Noah thought quickly, assessing options. Most of his crops were too established for emergency protective measures, but the experimental plots, the most valuable and vulnerable part of his operation, might be salvageable. "I need row cover material," Noah decided. "Anything we can use as temporary hail protection for the heritage plots." Marcus nodded. I've got some at my office. Others might have supplies too. I'll make calls." As Marcus coordinated with local farmers, Noah raced to the north barn, where the lockbox remained hidden. If Agricore was escalating to direct attacks, he couldn't risk leaving the ancestral container in its traditional location. Retrieving it from its hiding place, Noah was struck again by the intricate engravings, especially the weather symbols that seemed to depict both natural patterns and human interventions in atmospheric conditions. Did the Guardians know about weather modification too? He wondered aloud, carefully wrapping the lockbox in waterproof material before transferring it to a more secure location inside the house. The distinctive roar of Frank Mendoza's diesel truck announced the arrival of the first emergency supplies. Hundreds of feet of agricultural row cover material intended to protect delicate crops from frost, but which might offer some defense against hail damage. "Eleanor's bringing more," Frank announced as they unloaded the lightweight fabric. "Half the independent farmers in the county are gathering what they can. Word travels fast when Agricore pulls something like this." Within an hour, a small army of local farmers had assembled at Sunrise Acres, bringing supplies, equipment, and determined solidarity. As thunder rumbled in the distance and lightning illuminated the approaching storm front, they worked feverishly to stretch protective covering over the heritage crop sections, securing it against the strengthening wind. Noah was overwhelmed by the community response, people he barely knew laboring alongside him to protect not just crops but the principles of agricultural independence that his father had championed. These weren't just neighbors helping in a crisis, they were allies in a larger struggle against corporate control of food systems. As the last sections were covered and secured, rain began to fall, gently at first, then with increasing intensity. The workers retreated to vehicles and the barn as marble-sized hail started to ping against metal roofs and bounce off the ground. "It's working," called Marjorie Chen, a young organic farmer who had arrived with her entire crew. "The covers are holding," but their celebration was premature. Within minutes, the hail increased dramatically in size, golf ball, then baseball dimensions, pounding the land with destructive force. The protective covers began to tear under the assault, exposing vulnerable plants beneath. "We need to reinforce the center sections," Noah shouted over the storm's roar, pulling on a rain jacket and protective helmet from his father's emergency supplies. "Too dangerous," Marcus yelled back, gesturing at the violent bombardment happening just feet away. "That hail will concuss you!" But Noah had spotted something alarming. The largest hailstones were concentrating precisely over his experimental plots, while falling less intensely elsewhere. If this storm was indeed being manipulated, Agricore was targeting the heritage crops with surgical precision. Without further hesitation, Noah sprinted into the storm, hunched against the painful impacts as hailstones struck his protected head and shoulders. Reaching the failing row covers, he began desperately securing torn sections with additional material, working by instinct as lightning flashed overhead and thunder cracked with deafening intensity. Through driving rain and punishing hail, Noah glimpsed other figures joining him, Frank, Marjorie, and several others, all risking injury to protect what they collectively recognized as something worth preserving. Together they fought the storm, replacing shredded covers, reinforcing anchor points, and shielding particularly vulnerable plants with their own bodies when necessary. For 20 minutes that felt like hours. They endured the onslaught until finally the hail diminished and the storm's fury began to pass. Soaked, bruised, and exhausted, the impromptu crew surveyed the damage as rain continued to fall more gently. "We saved most of it," Frank assessed, limping slightly from a hailstone. "Impact to his knee. Outer rows took damage, but the core plantings are intact." Noah nodded, emotion tightening his throat as he looked at his battered but determined allies. "Thank you, all of you. I don't know why you would risk this for my farm." Not for your farm, Marjorie interrupted, wringing water from her long braid. For what it represents. Each independent operation that falls to Agricore takes us one step closer to complete corporate control of our food system. Your father understood that. We all do. As the group made their way back to shelter, Noah noticed Eleanor Whitman's car pulling into the farmyard. The elderly woman emerged with surprising energy for someone her age, concern evident in her expression. As she approached, "The heritage crops?" she asked without preamble. "Mostly saved," Noah confirmed, "thanks to everyone here." Relief softened Eleanor's features momentarily before her expression turned grave again. "This won't be their last attempt. Noah, the closer we get to harvest and the opening of the lockbox, the more desperate they'll become." Noah nodded, understanding the escalating pattern. "What I don't understand is why now? The Guardian knowledge has been protected for generations. What's changed that makes Agricore so determined to obtain it immediately?" Eleanor looked at the farmers gathering around them, then back to Noah. "Climate change," she stated simply. "The Guardian methods are the only agricultural system proven to thrive despite increasing weather volatility. As conventional approaches fail more frequently, whoever controls truly resilient farming techniques controls the future of global food security." Noah thought about the remarkable performance of the heritage crops, their deep root systems, efficient water usage, and resistance to temperature extremes. If these advantages could be replicated at scale without chemical inputs or proprietary technology, they would indeed represent an existential threat to Agricore's business model. "We need to increase security," Noah decided, addressing the group. "Not just for the crops, but for the lockbox itself. They're clearly willing to destroy what they can't steal." Frank Mendoza stepped forward. "My son and his friends are home from college for the summer. They can take shifts watching the property at night. I've got monitoring equipment you can borrow," added Sam Peterson. "Motion sensors, cameras, the works." As the farmers organized an impromptu security plan, Noah felt a profound shift in his relationship to this land and community. He had arrived months ago as a reluctant caretaker, counting the days until he could return to his real life in Chicago. Now he stood at the center of a struggle that connected global environmental challenges to this specific soil under his feet, surrounded by people who recognized the importance of what his family had preserved across generations. The stakes had risen beyond personal inheritance or even local agricultural practices. What lay protected in the harvest lockbox might represent essential knowledge for humanity's resilient food future. Knowledge that could be broadly shared for common benefit, or monopolized for corporate profit. As the storm clouds retreated eastward and weak sunshine began to break through, Noah made a silent promise to his father and all the Mitchell ancestors who had safeguarded their agricultural legacy. The lockbox would open as intended at harvest, and its contents would serve their original purpose, regardless of what obstacles Agricore might yet create. The countdown to autumn equinox and the unlocking of generations of Guardian wisdom had become a race against increasingly desperate corporate adversaries. With every attack, Noah became more convinced that what waited in the ancient metal container was indeed revolutionary enough to change modern agriculture forever. August gave way to September, bringing the first hints of autumn to the Nebraska landscape. The experimental plots at Sunrise Acres had become something of a local phenomenon, drawing farmers from neighboring counties to witness what many were calling miracle crops. Despite minimal irrigation and punishing heat, Noah's heritage varieties stood tall and vibrant, their yields promising to exceed regional averages by a significant margin. The scientific community had taken notice as well. Dr. Okafor's team from the University of Nebraska had extended their study, documenting the remarkable microclimate effects with growing excitement. Their preliminary paper, though not yet published, was already generating buzz in agricultural research circles, with terms like paradigm shifting and revolutionary bioadaptation appearing in peer reviews. For Noah, these scientific validations confirmed what he had been experiencing firsthand throughout the growing season. The guardian knowledge represented ecological understanding far beyond conventional agriculture. Every day spent observing the heritage crop's interaction with soil, water, and climate deepened his appreciation for what his ancestors had preserved across generations. Security around the farm had tightened further as harvest approached. Frank, Mendoza's son Tyler, and his friends had been joined by volunteers from throughout the county's independent farming community, maintaining round-the-clock surveillance. Sam Peterson had upgraded the monitoring system to include satellite tracking of vehicles approaching the property, the technology borrowed from a friend in wildlife conservation. Despite these precautions, the atmosphere of siege had taken its toll. Noah slept little, constantly alert for any sign of Agricore's next move. Preston Ellis's warning about less constrained methods had proven accurate. 3 separate incidents of attempted nighttime trespassing had been thwarted in the past 2 weeks alone. More concerning were reports from Eleanor's contacts about Agricore bringing in security consultants with military backgrounds, suggesting preparations for more aggressive action. On the morning of September 20th, just 2 days before the autumn equinox, when the lockbox could finally be opened, Noah sat at his kitchen table reviewing security protocols with Tyler Mendoza when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Alyssa's number, a rare occurrence since their relationship had cooled to occasional text messages. "Noah, are you okay?" Her voice carried unusual urgency. "I'm fine," he replied, confused by her concern. "What's wrong?" "There's something happening with Agricore," Alyssa explained. "I'm at a marketing conference in Boston, and one of the attendees is their communications director. She was just pulled out of a session for an emergency consultation about containing potential reputational damage from necessary operational security measures." Noah tensed, immediately understanding the implications. "They're planning something. Today or tomorrow." "That's what it sounds like," Alyssa confirmed. "I don't know details, but the timeline seems immediate." The team was being flown to Nebraska on a corporate jet within the hour. After thanking her and ending the call, Noah immediately mobilized his support network. Eleanor began making calls to sympathetic media contacts to create public awareness that might deter drastic action. Marcus Washington contacted the university researchers, whose academic presence provided additional protection. Sheriff Donovan, though limited in his authority against corporate interests, agreed to increase patrols near the property. By mid-afternoon, the farm had transformed into a hub of activity. Pickup trucks lined the driveway as farmers from across the county arrived, ostensibly to help with early harvest preparations, but actually forming a human shield against whatever Agricore might be planning. Dr. Okafor and her team accelerated their data collection, creating scientific documentation that would persist regardless of what happened to the physical crops. As evening approached, Noah retreated to the farmhouse briefly, needing a moment alone to center himself for whatever might come. In the quiet of his father's study, now his study, he retrieved the lockbox from its hiding place and set it on the desk, studying the intricate engravings that had become increasingly meaningful during his months working with the heritage crops. What was so important that generations of our family dedicated their lives to protecting it? He asked aloud, running his fingers over the astronomical symbols that indicated the autumn equinox, just over 24 hours away. His contemplation was interrupted by the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance, growing louder by the second. Noah rushed outside to see a sleek black helicopter approaching from the east, the Agricore logo clearly visible on its side. It circled the property once before hovering over an empty field adjacent to the experimental plots. Tyler Mendoza appeared. At Noah's side, binoculars in hand. 8 people on board, he reported tensely. Tactical gear, not corporate suits. The helicopter descended, touching down just beyond Noah's property line, carefully avoiding direct trespassing while establishing an obvious staging area. The security team that emerged deployed with military precision, establishing a perimeter and setting up what appeared to be surveillance equipment aimed at Sunrise Acres. They're preparing for something tonight, Noah concluded, watching the methodical operation. The equinox is tomorrow evening. They know the lockbox opens then. They can't wait any longer. Word spread quickly among the volunteers at the farm. Trucks were positioned to block access roads, floodlights were prepared to illuminate approaches after dark, and people stationed themselves strategically throughout the property. The atmosphere was tense but determined, a community standing, together against corporate intimidation. As darkness fell, Noah received an unexpected call from Preston Ellis. "Mitchell, listen carefully," the Agricore executive said, his voice low and urgent. "The research division has overridden standard protocols. They're planning to access your property at approximately 0200 hours to secure samples and the artifact by any means necessary." Noah's grip tightened on his phone. "You mean they're planning an armed invasion of private property?" "I'm not officially aware of operational details," Ellis replied carefully. "But I recommended against this approach and was overruled. I'm making this call because corporate acquisition is one thing. What they're planning crosses ethical and legal lines I'm not comfortable with." After ending the call, Noah gathered the core group of supporters to share this intelligence. The mood darkened as they realized they were facing not just corporate intimidation, but potentially armed intruders with substantial resources. "We should call the FBI," Marcus suggested. "Corporate espionage and armed trespassing are federal crimes. By the time they respond, whatever Agricore is planning will be over," Noah replied. "We need to move the lockbox and the most valuable crop samples to a secure location immediately." Eleanor Whitman, who had been quietly observing from a corner of the kitchen, spoke up with unexpected authority. "No, the lockbox stays exactly where it is." All eyes turned to the elderly woman, whose frail appearance belied the steel in her voice. "Agricore believes they need to obtain the Guardian knowledge before it becomes public at harvest," she continued. "What they don't understand is that the lockbox isn't designed to simply protect information. It's designed to share it at the right time, in the right way." "What do you mean?" Noah asked, confused by her certainty. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief. "The autumn equinox isn't just when the box can be opened, it's when it must be opened as part of a larger system. Your great-great-grandfather designed it with multiple layers of protection, Noah. The final one activates tomorrow." Before she could explain further, the farm's security system triggered alerts. Motion detectors on the eastern perimeter had been activated. On the monitoring screens, heat signatures showed figures moving through the darkness toward the experimental plots, hours earlier than Ellis had indicated. "They're coming now," Tyler announced tensely, "at least a dozen people approaching from multiple directions." Noah faced an immediate decision: confront the intruders directly or focus on protecting the lockbox and its contents. With Eleanor's cryptic statement in mind, he chose the latter. "Tyler, alert everyone and delay them as long as possible without anyone getting hurt," Noah instructed. "Marcus, contact Sheriff Donovan and get whatever official response you can. I need to prepare the lockbox." While the farm's defenders mobilized, Noah and Eleanor returned to his study where the ancient metal container waited. "What did you mean about it activating tomorrow?" Noah asked urgently, securing the room's windows. "The Guardian knowledge isn't just agricultural techniques. Eleanor explained, her voice calm despite the crisis unfolding outside. It's a complete system for ecological information sharing across generations and communities. The lockbox is designed to open only when its contents can be immediately demonstrated in living plants ready for harvest. She pointed to specific engravings on the box's surface. These aren't just decorative patterns. They're instructions for a specific harvest ritual that activates seed viability in the next generation. The box contains not just information, but specially prepared seed stock that must be planted according to precise astronomical timing. Shouts from outside indicated that confrontation between Agricore's team and the farm's defenders had begun. Through the window, Noah could see flashlight beams crisscrossing the darkness and hear the rumble of vehicles being positioned to block access to the house. "We don't have until tomorrow evening," Noah said grimly. "They're coming now." Eleanor placed her weathered hand on the lockbox, her expression serene despite the chaos. "What Agricore doesn't know, what even your father didn't fully understand, is that the box has additional protections beyond its physical lock. The seeds inside are encoded with genetic timestamps, activated by specific light wavelengths that only occur during the equinox. If forced open prematurely, the contents become non-viable." The sound of breaking glass elsewhere in the house indicated that intruders had breached the perimeter. Noah moved to barricade the study door, pushing a heavy bookcase against it while trying to process Eleanor's revelations. "You're saying if they steal the box and force it open, they get nothing of value?" "Worse than nothing," Eleanor confirmed with grim satisfaction. "The materials inside are designed to provide false information when accessed incorrectly, dead-end research paths that would waste years of scientific resources." A pounding at the study door punctuated her statement. "Mitchell, we know you're in there." The voice was unfamiliar, authoritative. "We have a legal warrant to seize agricultural materials suspected of patent infringement." "Patent infringement?" Noah called back incredulously. "On varieties that predate your company by centuries? Open the door now, or we'll be forced to enter," the voice demanded, ignoring his question. Noah looked to Eleanor, who nodded calmly. "Let them in," she whispered. "The box is prepared for this scenario." When Noah reluctantly removed the barricade and opened the door, 4 men in tactical gear entered swiftly, followed by a woman in corporate attire whom Noah recognized from news articles as Dr. Vanessa Chen, Agricore's chief research officer. "Mr. Mitchell," she acknowledged coolly, surveying the room until her gaze locked onto the lockbox. "Our legal department can explain the complexities of intellectual property claims later. For now, we're here for that artifact and samples from your experimental crops." "You have no right to either," Noah stated, positioning himself between the corporate team and the desk where the lockbox sat. Dr. Chen signaled to her security team, who moved to restrain Noah while maintaining a respectful distance from Eleanor, clearly unwilling to manhandle an elderly woman on camera. One operative transmitted images of the lockbox to someone outside, receiving confirmation before carefully placing it in a specialized container. "Your family has hoarded agricultural knowledge that could benefit humanity for generations," Dr. Chen said, addressing Noah with what seemed like genuine conviction. "Agricore has the resources to scale these techniques globally, feeding millions while generating necessary returns for our shareholders." "That's not why you want it," Noah countered, struggling against his captors. "You want to control it, patent it, and prevent independent farmers from using methods that would free them from dependency on your chemical systems." Dr. Chen shrugged slightly. "Market efficiency requires centralized expertise and distribution. The agricultural romanticism of small family farms is a luxury the planet can no longer afford given climate challenges." As the security team prepared to exit with their prize, Eleanor Whitman began to laugh, a surprising, knowing sound that stopped Dr. Chen in her tracks. "Something amusing, Mrs. Whitman?" the executive asked with thinly veiled irritation. "Merely appreciating the elegance of Samuel Mitchell's design," Eleanor replied. "He anticipated corporate theft over a century ago and prepared accordingly. That box is worthless without the activation sequence that occurs during tomorrow's equinox harvest ritual." Dr. Chen's expression revealed momentary uncertainty before her corporate confidence reasserted itself. "Our labs can overcome any primitive protection mechanisms." "Your labs will destroy precisely what you're trying to steal," Eleanor countered. "The contents are genetically keyed to specific light wavelengths that occur only during tomorrow's astronomical alignment. Force it open prematurely, and the seed stock becomes non-viable and the documentation indecipherable." For the first time, doubt flickered across Dr. Chen's features. She consulted briefly with someone via her earpiece before turning back to Noah. "If there's a specific opening protocol, Mr. Mitchell can demonstrate it for our technical team." "I can't," Noah replied. "Truthfully, the box was designed to be opened only by someone who has completed a full growing cycle with the heritage crops. I haven't fully harvested yet." The standoff might have continued if not for the sudden wail of sirens and the distinctive whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors directly overhead. Not Agricore's corporate transport, but larger military-grade aircraft. Through the windows, powerful searchlights illuminated the farmyard as vehicles with federal government markings poured onto the property. Dr. Chen's security team froze, listening to urgent communications through their earpieces. The corporate executive's composed facade cracked visibly as she received the same information. "Federal agents," she said flatly. "How did you—" "We didn't," Noah replied, equally surprised by this development. The explanation arrived moments later in the form of Dr. Amara Okafor, who entered the study accompanied by two individuals showing Department of Agriculture credentials. "Dr. Chen," Okafor acknowledged with professional coolness, "I see you've developed a sudden interest in historical agricultural preservation." "This is a corporate security operation addressing intellectual property concerns," Chen replied stiffly. "Your presence is unnecessary and potentially disrupting to sensitive research protocols." One of the federal agents stepped forward. "Actually, this is now a federal investigation into corporate espionage, unauthorized access to a USDA-protected heritage seed bank, and attempted theft of nationally significant agricultural resources." Noah looked to Eleanor in confusion. "USDA protected? A heritage seed bank?" The elderly woman smiled enigmatically. "I may have filed some paperwork after our last Agricore encounter. The Guardian knowledge doesn't belong to any individual or corporation. It needs institutional protection while remaining in the hands of those who understand its proper use." As federal agents took control of the situation, securing the lockbox as evidence and escorting Agricore personnel from the property, Noah found himself standing beside Eleanor at the farmhouse window, watching the dramatic scene unfold in the yard below. "You knew this might happen," he said, not a question, but a realization. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," Eleanor replied. "But the Guardians have been protecting this knowledge from those who would monopolize it for centuries. Each generation faces its own version of Agricore, those who see the land and its bounty as something to control rather than something to steward." Dawn was breaking by the time the federal agents had documented the intrusion, taken statements from witnesses, and secured the property. The lockbox remained in official custody, but with assurances that it would be returned for the equinox opening as part of the ongoing investigation. As Noah walked his fields in the early morning light, surveying crops nearly ready for harvest, Dr. Okafor joined him, clipboard in hand and scientific curiosity evident in her expression. "What your family preserved here goes beyond agricultural technique," she observed. "It represents a fundamentally different relationship with food systems. One that modern science is only beginning to understand. But will understanding lead to wisdom?" Noah wondered aloud. "Agricore's not wrong about the scale of global food challenges. They're just wrong about the solution." Okafor nodded thoughtfully, which is why the Guardian approach needs both protection and broader implementation. My team's research suggests these methods could be adapted to various climates and soil types with appropriate modifications. The potential impact on climate resilience is extraordinary. As they discussed possibilities, Noah realized the path forward was becoming clear. The Guardian knowledge wasn't meant to remain hidden, but neither was it meant to be controlled by corporate interests. Its true purpose was to be shared with those who would use it responsibly, a middle way between secrecy and exploitation. By that evening, federal authorities had established a security perimeter around the farm in anticipation of the equinox opening. Agricore had issued a carefully worded statement about cooperating with authorities to resolve misunderstandings regarding agricultural research protocols. Their legal department clearly in damage control mode as news of the nighttime raid spread through media channels. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, marking the approach of the autumn equinox, Noah was reunited with the Lockbox under careful supervision. Eleanor, Dr. Okafor, Marcus, and representatives from both the USDA and the university gathered to witness what generations of Mitchells had protected. "The alignment occurs at precisely 7:42 p.m., Eleanor instructed. "The box must be in the center of the heritage plot when it's opened, with the harvested plants surrounding it in a specific pattern." Following her guidance, Noah arranged sheaves of the heritage crops in a circular pattern, positioning the lockbox on a small platform at the center. As the calculated moment approached, he inserted the key his father had left him, feeling a profound connection to generations of Mitchells who had performed this same ritual across centuries. At exactly 7:42 p.m., with the sun's equinox light striking the box at a precise angle, the complex locking mechanism yielded with surprising ease. The lid opened to reveal contents that were simultaneously more modest and more extraordinary than Noah had imagined. Inside lay three main components: a small leather-bound journal filled with handwritten notes in several languages, a collection of sealed glass vials containing what appeared to be soil samples, and most precious of all, carefully preserved seed packets labeled with planting instructions corresponding to different astronomical alignments. But what made these ordinary-seeming materials extraordinary was their response to the equinox light. As the specific wavelengths struck the seeds, they began to emit a faint bioluminescence, a genetic marker activated by the precise conditions of the opening ritual. The soil samples similarly responded, the microbial communities within them awakening from dormancy in response to the specific light signature. "Genetic photoreceptors," Dr. Okafor whispered in astonishment, recording the phenomenon with scientific instruments. "The seeds and microbial colonies are keyed to specific light wavelengths that only occur during astronomical alignments. I've never seen anything like this." Eleanor nodded in satisfaction. The Guardians understood that knowledge could be encoded in living organisms more securely than in any human record system. Each generation activates the next through this ritual, maintaining continuous lineage while preventing unauthorized reproduction. As Noah carefully examined the journal, he found detailed instructions for maintaining the Guardian system. Not just agricultural techniques, but a comprehensive approach to ecological stewardship that connected soil health, plant genetics, and human responsibility in a continuous cycle. Annotations from successive generations of Mitchells, including his father and grandfather, documented adaptations to changing conditions while maintaining core principles. This isn't just about farming, Noah realized aloud. It's about relationship, a different way of seeing ourselves as part of natural systems rather than masters over them. In the days that followed, the implications of the Guardian knowledge began to ripple outward. The federal investigation into Agricore's attempted corporate espionage expanded to include their weather modification programs and anti-competitive practices against independent farmers. Class action lawsuits emerged from communities affected by their more aggressive tactics. More importantly, the scientific validation of the heritage techniques opened new possibilities for climate-resilient agriculture. Under the joint protection of university research protocols and federal agricultural programs, the Guardian methods began a careful transition from family secret to public resource, available to farmers who committed to the ethical framework that had always accompanied the technical knowledge. For Noah Mitchell, the resolution brought both clarity and new questions. The autumn harvest exceeded all expectations, producing extraordinary yields with minimal inputs. The university research team documented results that challenged conventional agricultural models and opened promising new research directions in microbial ecology. On a crisp October evening, as the last of the harvest was being completed, Noah sat on the farmhouse porch with Eleanor, watching the sunset paint the fields in gold and amber. My father never told me any of this, Noah reflected. All those years of feeling disconnected from him, from this place, when we were actually part of something remarkable. Daniel wanted you to find your own way to the knowledge, Eleanor explained gently. The Guardian tradition holds that each generation must discover rather than inherit their calling. Some are called to be keepers of the seeds, others to be spreaders of understanding. He saw in you the potential to bridge worlds, to translate ancient wisdom into modern scientific language. Noah considered this as he watched combines moving methodically through the distant fields. His phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Saw the news about Agricore, proud of what you're doing. Call when you're ready to talk about next steps. The message crystallized the decision that had been forming in Noah's mind throughout the harvest season. Sunrise Acres wasn't simply an inheritance to maintain or liquidate. It was a living laboratory where ancient wisdom and modern science could collaborate to address urgent global challenges. I'm not selling the farm, he told Eleanor, the words feeling right as he spoke them. But I'm not keeping the knowledge locked here either. There's a middle path. Research partnerships, farmer training programs, open-source seed development with ethical licensing. Eleanor smiled, satisfaction evident in her expression. The Guardian way has never been about hoarding wisdom, but about ensuring it's used with responsibility and respect. Each generation finds the appropriate balance between protection and sharing for their time. As darkness settled over fields that had fed 5 generations of Mitchells and now promised to help feed a climate-challenged world, Noah felt the weight of the Lockbox's legacy, not as a burden, but as a purpose that connected his scientific training with deeper wisdom his ancestors had preserved through centuries of careful stewardship. The Harvest Lockbox had indeed changed everything. Not by revealing some magical agricultural secret, but by reconnecting modern knowledge with ancient understanding, scientific analysis with ecological wisdom, and one reluctant farmer with a legacy larger than he had ever imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.